In my book, The False Testament, I've gathered the studies of a Greek engineer from the University of Di Padrasso who defines Hephaestus as an authentic engineer because his mechanical objects were of a very high standard. They were the ones that produced weapons for them. They were the ones who produced vehicles that went alone to do a service and come back by themselves. They would do everything just using wheels. This here from Homer. There's an article in the Science magazine where they talk about the Gan Eden, published in 2014, where they say, when they're talking about the biblical Gan Eden, they place it in the same place where I situated, and then after it says, Homer tells something very similar. He narrates something very similar. He writes about a Gan Eden located somewhere else, because there were several ones in different places where they've done a series of experiments, especially with food, vegetables and animals. Most of the domesticated species arrive in the period that is spoken of in the ancient text, about 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. And they emerge from the area where the Gan Eden is located. This is between the Caspian Sea and Turkey. And as it is written here in the Science article, our wheat arose from a genetic event that in theory could never have taken place, between 8,000 to 9,000 years ago, in the region where present-day Armenia is located, close to the Caspian Sea. A second genetic event happened with the wheat, which was impossible. Immediately afterwards, other changes happened that gave rise to the cereals we eat today. So, there where they operated, a series of changes happened. A series of changes, not one. A series of genetic events that are impossible in nature. And they do not take place on the violet or on the daisies, but rather on the cereals. In other words, on the food with which millions and millions of people have been fed upon. Simultaneously, at the same time in South America, the potato suffers a genetic intervention in which, here, the person who writes this article in Science says, just as the AGM are altered in the laboratory, something happened that in nature cannot be produced. But how is it that all these events occur, which are impossible in nature? And they all happen in the places where they used to work and operate. There they would cultivate food good for consumption. And impossible genetic events take place. But impossible is impossible. Okay then, let's consider them to be rare events. Very well. But when these mutations take place, like the one that took place in man, the Robertsonian Translocation, which makes it go from 48 chromosomes to 46, that individual dies immediately. He dies. If you fuse chromosomes number 2 and 3, then the individual cannot reproduce himself. Because if he copulates with a female or vice versa that has 48 chromosomes, it cannot be reproduced, and it ends here. And this is what has happened to us. But what does that mean? What happened to a male in the center of Africa who suffered the Robertsonian Translocation, by which 2 chromosomes, number 2 and 3, have merged into one, in an isolated area that has not produced the death of the individual. Attention, this is what would have happened. In a male and simultaneously in a female, they have met in the middle of the African jungle. They have liked each other, they had sex, they had children. And these two did not die. They had children. And after the events with the copy of the chromosomes, these children didn't die. And then these united amongst themselves, with the father or with the mother or between brothers. And from here the human of 46 chromosomes was born, instead with the 48 that the primates have. All by random, all by chance. The geneticist from here, There's an article about this I've been sent. It says that this is something that can only be explained one way. It's about a genetic intervention performed on a group of males and a group of females that they had under control for a long time, because if they had been released into the wild, they would have died. After that, once all this worked, they were liberated into nature. And this Robertsonian translocation involves a reproductive block in the sense that if you return them to nature and reunite them with any primate that has 48 chromosomes, then they can't reproduce. They can only reproduce amongst themselves. Therefore, a pure new species is created, the Homo sapiens, starting from the Erectus or the Habilis. Just an entire team. No more. No more. Darwinism? No. There isn't any. So more and more scientists are opening their minds to these things here. One is called Pietro Buffa, who is soon going to publish another book in which important academics are collaborating, who are taking into account what we are talking about here. National and international scholars who are taking into account this hypothesis of a controlled evolution, guided. For us, as a fact, the geneticists cannot explain how it is that we have 12 genetic sequences that we don't share with anyone, and that we don't know where they came from. And these are the ones that have produced brain development, which is what makes us sapiens. Where does it come from? No one can give us an explanation. A person in order says, Buffa says that this is the manipulated gene of Adam.
Chiedo a Mauro come si vuole comportare e poi venne anche la platea, prego. Per adesso ce la faccio. 2, 3, ok, 3 domande, cominciamo un po' con le domande. Ah, c'è la calenda. Sì, allora 4 domande, 1, 2, 3, tutti con lei me l'aveva fatta prima. Ma c'entra lo stesso.
Okay, so they asked me to talk about Kal-El. We all know Superman. When I was little, he was called Nembo Kid. Superman is a character invented by 2 Hebrews in the 30s, and they call him Kal-El, which means fast and light in Hebrew. El is the name of God. It is a guy who comes from another planet, who is more powerful than man, but is mortal, exactly like the biblical Elohim. Superman's father is called Yor-El, which means light of El. In other words, 2 Hebrews have invented something that we have in front of our eyes, but we do not want to see. They put everything in front of us. Star Trek 40 years ago had the same technology that we have now today. The same technology, the same. In 20 or 25 years, we will see teletransportation appear, which already exists. The host says, there's a sequence of images, a beautiful scene in the film 2001 Space Odyssey, where the Commander Bowman, in the space station that is in orbit, talks to a colleague who is on the ground while he's eating. And he does it using a tablet, a little bigger than ours from nowadays, but nonetheless, it's a tablet. Look, in 1967, the knowledge that some people had, and who also have collaborated with us, perhaps, or maybe they have collaborated and worked for military states, the knowledge they had 40 years ago. Therefore, we have these toys today. Who are studying this know this. Exactly, we buy a technology that is already there, but instead of selling it all, we sell it to you in parts. But that's it. Everything is already... Excuse me, sorry. Can you put the questions in order? Because I don't know. I'm quickly referring to what has been said before in reference to the Darwinian theory. I want to remind you that Darwinian associations are present everywhere, and these say that atheist associations close. There is no creation because Darwinism exists.
Che se la teoria darwiniana sta facendo acqua da tutte le parti, le associazioni degli atei devono chiudere tutte, perché uno dei loro dogmi è appunto questo: non c'è la creazione perché c'è il darwinismo.
I agree. On the other hand, it's like that.
D'altra parte è così. D'altra parte è così. Ed è il motivo, possiamo...
The reason, can we tell, the reason why the Union of Italian Agnostics has rejected the proposal for me to give a conference in Verona
rifiutato di fare una richiesta per una mia conferenza a Verona. E perché
is because they say that I'm also against the others. I'm one against all of them, theologians, believers, atheists. Biglino not.
cioè proprio contro, hanno rifiutato, tant'è che Nicola che hanno anche dovuto rivolgersi. Quella lì era la più immediata, no? Cioè Biglino, chiamiamo gli altri. Di Biglino, no. Esce da questo corpo. Volevo dire.
A person from the audience says, I wanted to, I've written a book called Life. I would like you to talk about paranormal phenomena.
Dei fenomeni paranormali.
My daughter,
E a mia figlia.
Perché a tua famiglia ne ha parlato per 2 ore, cioè io posso parlare per 2 ore di fenomeni inspiegabili.
Cioè io che sono...
I am mostly the terrestrial one, dusty, rational on the face of the earth.
Ho una figlia che ha 40
I have a daughter who lives with absolute normality, a series of phenomena. Let us say strange.
Vado in fondo,
No, but you shouldn't tell it here in public.
tutto vero, raccontare così pubblicamente. Ah, non è un caso? Partiamo, lei li vive bene da quando era piccola, quindi viviamo bene. Abbiamo una domanda la sua normalità.
Another question from the audience.
Sì.
Hello, I wanted to ask a question that has partially been answered already. All this technology used by the Elohim, the ships, the flying cars, all this huge technology regarding DNA, on genetic manipulation, what has remained of this? I mean, has anything remained? Has anything remained at an archaeological level? Where do we find proof and recognizable signals?
Sono rimasti a livello archeologico qualcosa, cioè oggigiorno dove abbiamo la testimonianza oltre che scritta,
Lei,
testi,
sì, lei conosce i libri?
Do you know the book by Marco Pizzuti?
no.
Allora,
No?
scoperte archeologiche-
Unauthorized archaeological discoveries?
non autorizzate.
Thanks. If you want to read it in English, it is in Our Occulted History by Jim Mars, where it is hypothesized about where these discoveries are.
Anche dove sono,
They are always the same, but then they call me an anti-Semitic, that I am...
che sono sempre gli stessi. Però se lo dico poi mi dicono che sono antisemita.
ciao Mauro, ciao.
Hello Mauro. Hello. I'm going to ask you a question that, on one hand, first I want to congratulate you for your work. My question is directed more for the Mauro Biglino, the man, than the professional. Therefore I ask for a personal consideration.
Mauro Biglino l'uomo
It is a question that does not pretend to obtain an absolute answer, obviously.
è una domanda che non prevede
What is, according to you, the meaning of our life?
qual è secondo te il senso della nostra vita? Quindi,
That which we live. But this is the meaning of my life. It does not have to be the same for another.
Buonasera dottore.
Dove siamo?
Good afternoon, doctor. Good afternoon. Where are you? Oh, okay. I know a little about the Vedas. I think that Sujaram Najam in India. Have you been able to get deeper into this topic? Can you tell me something else? Thank you. I have looked into it directly, in the sense that this book, The Falling of the Gods, is written by 4 hands with Enrico Baccarini, who is the expert in this literature. This that happened, for example, in Mohenjo-Daro, and we are talking about the area of the Indus Valley, Sarasvati, present-day Pakistan, is something absolutely extraordinary in the sense that what happened there can be expressed with what in Sanskrit is called Noretiyas Astrash, which means energy weapons, not nuclear energy. There you have it, in the sense of thermal energy, because the bodies, the few bodies that have been found there were burned, calcinated. Calcinated means that the mineral part of the skeleton has evaporated, have been found millions of years ago. Because the person who protected this place is a sheep herder. I mean, it's not a way to despise, but it's really like that. He does not care at all about this place. The remains that have been found have been analyzed by several laboratories, both here in Italy and the United States. And these were petrified at temperatures between 1800 and 2000 degrees, applied for 4 seconds and a half. And the explosion had to have taken place a few hundred meters above the earth, because there's not, how to explain it, the crater of the explosion. Therefore, what has exploded has produced a temperature of 1800 to 2000 degrees for 4.5 seconds. And we do not know what it was. Something different was what happened, for example, in Sodom and Gomorrah. And the historical period is exactly the same, 2000 BC, when these fought against each other with their weapons, coming after them with their weapons. Sodom and Gomorrah. If we read the Sumero-Akkadian text, to which I refer in the book, you find it in this book that I've written with Baccarini. You find it with all the scientific documentation, with all the analytics of the laboratories, etc. There you can find everything perfectly. Regarding Sodom and Gomorrah, the funny thing is that whoever gave the order, the permission to use these weapons, because they were weapons that strangely could only be used with the boss' permission at a certain point. That is how it's written in the Sumero-Akkadian text. In the Lamentations it says, "But how has the wind of the sea arrived here? Who could have imagined it?" And they must have left them the area where the command center was located in Mesopotamia, because of the bombs that had blown up in Sodom and Gomorrah, which is 100 kilometers away. And they hadn't calculated that the sea wind was going to get them. And the description of the sea wind, I mean, if we take Sodom and Gomorrah and instead we put Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we do not have to change a single comma. We do not have to change a single comma of what is written, of what happened to the bodies of the people who were there. They vomited blood, their lungs burned, their hair fell off. Those who hid inside the houses died like ants. So the bosses managed to escape. Therefore, as we were saying before, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the books of the Mahabharata, the Mahabharata, for those who do not know it, are the Iliad and Odyssey, but the expanded version, in other words, colossal. And what they tell is the last part of a war that took place between relatives, just like this one here. These had to exterminate all of the rest, all of them. They had to exterminate all the others, all the relatives. They had to exterminate the Amorites, the Moabites, the Amalekites.
Tutti i loro parenti. Dovevano sterminare i Moabiti, gli Ammoniti, gli Amalekiti, eccetera. Lotte tra parenti.
We have, for example, the moral question posed by Arjun, which is one of the contenders, who asks himself, it's not how we have to fight with each other, but with what we are going to fight each other. And he's given a big lot of flying machines. And he fights with the machines that fly, and these machines are really described. They describe different types of crafts, and they are described according to their functions. They were the ones that could move under the water, the ones that could fly above the atmosphere as well as outside of it. It is described how they should be built, and the pilots, it is written how the pilots had to take care of the machines. We would have to close our eyes to think that this is not true. I mean, it is impressive this we are talking about, because by force majeure we must close our eyes to this evidence upon these narrations. And I find it fascinating because I suppose it could be true. I've said it before. They suppose that this is the God in the Bible. And anyway, I am supposing about all this I read, not about something that I think that has happened in a certain way and the reasoning for this. You will find it in the book, in the second part that Baccarini wrote. You will find, as we mentioned before, you will find the routes through which they passed while arriving to this place here. And you'll find the starting point, which we have said, I can't remember the name in Sanskrit. Patience, please.